Yo, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my show, The Houseless Podcast. I'm Peter Agostin. I'm the host and the producer. CJ Stewart, that's the editor of the show. And if this is your first time listening, thank you so much for tuning in and checking it out. You know what I'm saying? And if you're a repeat listener, I sincerely appreciate the time and the effort you put into bending an ear to this thing. So, trying to get I'm looking at the SoundCloud page here, which is at soundcloud.com/The Houseless Podcast. We're almost up to 500 followers. You know, it's a small number in the relative scale of things, but to me, I find it to be a very significant benchmark. As of right now, when I'm recording this, we're at 494. So if you got a page, or if your homie has a page, or if your niece or nephew got one, just get on there and subscribe to the Houseless Podcast. It's one way I know I can interact with folks, and it's a good way to share our many episodes. I've been doing this now for a year and a half. A lot of great, candid, and very revealing, unique, long-form conversations that I have with people in the music biz and elsewhere. You know, it's people I know and work with. So get on there and subscribe. It would mean a great deal to me. We're fastly approaching 50,000 plays at SoundCloud too. So shout out to everybody that tunes in that way. If you listen on Google Play, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, anyway, any of these third-party sites, thank you. However you can obtain it, it means a lot to me that you spend any time checking it out and listening. Today's episode was with an incredible writer, a guy I've known for a long time, Mosi Reeves. So Mosi and I go way back. He is a music journalist, currently contributing to Rolling Stone, Spin, the East Bay Express, NPR. We know each other from back in the Herb magazine days. And briefly, I wrote for the Miami New Times, whom Mosi was a music editor. He kicked me down a job way back in the day, but he's also contributed to The Wire, Village Voice, Vibe, Billboard, The Source, MTV, San Francisco Chronicle, and many, many other places. So we just riffed. This is a conversation we had earlier this winter, and I wanted to share it with y'all. He was briefly in New York City, and so we caught up at the crib, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and we just talked music, and I talked about his career a little bit. So it's a good music journalist kind of riff sesh, you know what I'm saying? And it was fun. About a year or two ago, he put out this book, self-published, called Notes on Post-Millennial Rap. And it's like a collection of essays and features on a whole range of topics in hip-hop and the history, in journalistically speaking. So I copped that when he first put it out, or actually when he was put on a pre-sale for it. And I know that he's got a couple of copies left. So after we wrapped this conversation I'm about to get into with y'all, he was like, listen, I got a couple copies. So if any of you guys out there are interested in picking up this book, which he self-published and otherwise is essentially out of print, you can hit me up here at the podcast. Either get at me at Twitter at HouselessPod. You can find my contact at the SoundCloud page link as well. And let me know, and I can arrange a sale of the book to you. So if you're a collector of music books like me, and interested in hip-hop journalism and all that stuff in between, Notes on Post-Millennial Rap by Mosi Reeves, you can grab through me. I can kind of middleman this thing for you. So, yes, why don't we hop into this conversation real quick? Hey, it's only here on the Houseless Podcast with your host, Peter Agostin. Please don't forget to subscribe if you got a friend out there that might be into this. A lot of people like a lot of different kinds of podcasts. I ran into someone last night. They're like, oh, what kind of podcast do you listen to? I'm like, well, I make one, and you can check it out. It's called The House List. You might like it, So anyway, do it and help me get the word out and continue to entertain you guys with these kind of conversations. So let's get into my joint real quick with Mosi Reeves here on The House List. But, at the same time, it's not like... since we're jumping right into it, I haven't seen you in probably 15 years.
Right. Miami.
Miami was the last time I saw you. So, and that was when because you're not from there though, right? You're from the Bay.
Yeah, I'm originally from Sacramento.
Okay, because we started. I mean, I knew you before Miami, but you were really working there, writing there regularly for the New Times, right?
Yeah, I started out in Oakland.
Okay.
And I was at the Bay Guardian, and I knew you because of our magazine.
Right.
Then I went out to Miami, and I was the music editor at the Miami New Times.
Right. It's interesting, too, in a way, because I just talked to Jeff Weiss, day before yesterday, and we were sort of talking about this, now that the LA Weekly got bought, and The Voice, obviously the Village Voice, got, dismantled or whatever, and they're owned by Voice Media. But, and I'm not an expert on this whatsoever, but I do know that there's some sort of connection between the New Times and Voice Media, and I think at one point in time, at least the LA Weekly was owned by New Times, right? Do you know
right,
this trajectory?
Well, there was Voice Media, and then they sold it to a different company because of the Backpages scandal.
Oh, yes, Backpages.
Where
right.
Backpages had sex ads.
Right.
And there was this whole thing about prostitution and, predators, and then New Times decided to keep Backpages.
Right.
And then they sold all of the papers. They sold most of the papers. I don't think they sold all of them. They sold most of the papers, and then that became Voice Media. Well, it was already called Voice Media. New Times was already Voice Media, but then they sold the papers. I can't remember which way it was.
Right. So you had already left New Times by the time all this
Yeah,
stuff,
I was
right?
already gone by then. I was at Creative Loafing in Atlanta when New Times bought Voice Media.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember people asking me, "Oh yeah, how is New Times?" I'm like, "Well, all you guys are gonna get fired." and there's all these old dudes in Village Voice, and they fancy themselves as the king of media, and doesn't matter, New Times, that's how they do. They buy the paper, they fire everybody, they install their own people, and that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, I know, it's not necessarily a surprise, and it's funny because as I was talking about this with Jeff too, I started to realize how that's the same model that when you see with, especially in years past with commercial radio, when a program, a station that was especially for hip hop or whatever, urban music that would then be sold and just flip into either talk radio or country or something like that, and all these regular normal people that would be a part of their day-to-day lives, the same way a paper would be, are just kind of left in the cold. All the people that work there are fired and shit, and it's just just corporate acquisitions. Not to say that I don't mean to necessarily start the conversation with you like that, but you've been in the business of writing as and being a journalist for 2 decades plus, right?
Yeah, I started out in Sacramento in 1996.
For the Sacramento.
And this is for the Sacramento
for the
Observer.
What?
Sacramento Observer.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's this community. It's this black community newspaper, and they used to cover cotillions and community events and weddings and the typical neighborhood stuff.
Right.
Then I started freelancing for the Sacramento News and Review, and that's when I started writing about music.
So it really started reporting, I was almost like a reporter.
Yeah, I started out more as a regular community reporter.
Oh yeah.
And I was buying this is back when you could call up record labels, say, "Hey, I really like your label." So I did that with Raucous.
Uh-huh.
I was a big rock fan, and I was just calling them up, asking really stupid questions, just to get them on the phone and be able to talk with them. When is this 12-inch coming out, and how can I get this one? And just making up stuff.
Right.
And I was
you
buying
got to start those relationships with them somehow, right?
Yeah, and this is back. You would literally I remember when I first talked to Catherine Frazier at Biz 3.
Right.
she's known for, now she's known for working with Skrillex. But at the time, she was known for all of LP stuff at the Philip Ducks.
Oh, yeah. She was basically was their in-house publicist, too, for the label, right? For Def Jux.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I remember talking to her in 2000, and she literally just talked to me for an hour and a half. That's how it was then. You would talk to people on the phone.
Right.
And you just have these really long, engaging conversations. Not where it's all email.
Yeah. Now, it's a totally different game. It was a lot. Obviously, technology and time, everything changes, But I think, especially if you started in the late '90s into right now, every year there was some sort of shift, of some kind. Both trend-wise, hip hop. Because you've done a lot of hip hop coverage. Right? By the lion's share of your writing has been.
I would say the majority of it has been hip hop. Right. I have covered indie rock in the past.
Right.
All of the Up With People stuff that came out in the late 2000s, Young Folks, and all this really super poppy mainstream. That's kind of when I wasn't interested in indie rock anymore. But late 90s, early 2000s, I was covering indie rock. I used to cover electronic music, especially house music. But yeah, like you said, the main stuff that I've always been known for is hip hop.
So how did you, if we met kind of through Herb Magazine, at least becoming familiar with each other's names, I guess, right? That's pretty true.
Yeah.
And amongst...
I think you actually started at Herb Magazine, I was looking through some back issues.
Right. Oh, yeah, that was my first place. Essentially the first place I got, first magazine for sure. I did some college newspaper album reviews at Virginia Tech at a place called the Collegiate Times when I was all of 16 years old or something like that. Because it really, for me, it sort of started at college radio. When I was in high school, I did college radio, and then I got more adept to talking to labels, and then really through the music groups, the rec.music, hip hop music, those news groups, I think. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I remember those. I didn't do the news groups, but I did do the SOH board.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Another classic community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Herb was a real starting point for a lot of writers. Oliver Wang really gave me my first break. He was a singles editor or a music editor, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Wazoo, John Monica, who's over at the New York Times now.
Yeah.
Dave Tompkins.
Yeah.
No, Dave Tompkins actually, did he actually start there? I think he was at Spin, and he actually started it up. He started it up in 93 or 94 or something.
Wow. Yeah. And yeah, these guys were really, for me to have grown up in a small town, there was no sort of sophisticated conversations you can have with anyone about hip hop music as far as intellectualizing it or analyzing it, So it was whatever print media you had at the time. So to see these guys who were, would be essentially your contemporaries too, and everyone has their own, stylistic approach, was a pretty amazing era. I feel maybe those early to mid 90 years, because everyone would then splinter off into really depending on what they aspired to, would go on to landing bigger jobs or professor type shit, or obviously books. And you wrote a book as well, which I like to talk about. But yeah, I guess what I'm interested too is looking back at that period of time for you, how you're how you look at it now, because this is 20 years ago basically. So as far as what your workload was and what you were covering at Herb and what we were all doing.
Looking back on it now, I feel I came in at the tail end of that golden era. When you really look at the golden years of indie rap, right, that's kind of I would say that goes from 93 or
right.
That's when you start seeing a lot of the street rap 12 inches, New York, That's when Soul Side happens.
Right. Yeah.
And then Raucous is that's kind of when the music industry at large becomes aware of it, and it becomes this whole underground versus mainstream phenomenon.
Yeah.
In '99 is kind of the peak of that.
Right. And you were covering stuff, though, continuously throughout all of that, though.
Well, no. I mean, I would say when I started, it was kind of the tail end of that, like 98, 99, 2000. That's when Def Jam starts. And then when Jay-Z's, like, The Blueprint came out,
right.
I feel like that marked the end. That marked the end of the general media class being interested in underground rap. Like, I remember seeing Oliver Wang write about The Blueprint and saying, well, this is kind of like it felt like a resolution because Jay-Z was using like all these like classic beats and classic samples, but at the same time, just the critics felt like what he was doing was a lot stronger than whatever was going on from a lyrical perspective. Like, now we could have a whole other conversation about that. Like,
would you say, not to interrupt you, but would you say that I think it's an interesting point that you make, especially with that album, because that was maybe also maybe a fork in the road for writers too, who would then maybe abandon some of the quote unquote like underground or indie hip hop genre started to really become like top heavy and overly saturated. Those writers too would then either graduate to like more like a New York Times style of writing where it's general pop coverage, or they would go completely into exploring more genre and stuff. I just noticed where there was a divide where, and if you're a working writer too, you want to you go where the work is too. I mean, to a certain degree.
No, I mean, I would agree with that. Like, I feel like the Jay-Z album marked that road.
Right.
For me personally, I continue to cover underground stuff. Like, that's when I started listening to a lot of the LA stuff, like Bus Driver and Shakespeare's and Rhymesayers and and even Dilla, like, people weren't paying attention to Dilla when he was during those years, and of course now, like, he's a godhead. But
right.
I remember when Dilla died in '96, Fat Cat, who was like the first guy he rapped with, was like, "Why didn't you guys love him when he was here?" And that's kind of what Dilla didn't really get respected by the music industry until the very end, like '95, right? That's when he started working with. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
2000, like 2005.
Right.
Because he died in February 2006.
Right.
Oh, 2005. He's living with Common.
Yeah.
Like, he gets placements on Common's album.
Yeah.
Like, and he starts. He gets. He started to work in the music industry again. But like, there's that whole period when he was putting out stuff on European labels and putting out stuff on ABB, and like, the mainstream rap industry didn't care.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think at first maybe when Slum Village came out, the press didn't know what to do with them too. In a way, I think you look back at those records and because of Dilla's overall canon of work, people somehow have found new appreciations for Slum Village. I think when it was definitely like For the Heads, a certain kind of head got those tapes, especially the Fantastic Volume 1, and that was like a thing. But I think that the press didn't. And like the general consensus of people outside of like hardcore heads maybe were like, they were first focused on the rappers in the group. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could be wrong. I think it's subjective too, but
Well, with the Slum Village, the thing was that the beats were amazing, but the raps were all of these pit raps, and that really threw a lot of people off. Like, I remember they did the Thelonious track, and that's when Common used F word, and he got a lot of criticism for that. Like, I remember seeing Common I remember seeing Common in San Francisco, and he literally made an effort to edit that word out of his song.
At a show.
Yeah, because this is the kind of stuff maybe I'm not showing up in a music store. I wrote about it actually.
About that particular moment?
Yeah, he did a show where he saw two guys kissing. It was just and so he went into this homophobic freestyle.
Right.
And people were like, "Just whoa, what is this?"
Wow.
And then around his time, I saw Ghostface Killer do the same thing. Was like, "Get this shit out of here,"
right.
I actually wrote a story about that for the Bay Guardian. Where there's this whole I wrote about this whole undercurrent of homophobia among conscious rappers.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, going back to Slum Village, I think that's why people are so confused by them, because they expected a Mos Def rapping over this kind of beats. They didn't expect Midwest pit raps.
Right. Yeah, which now I think they've actually, was maybe a little ahead of its time, because people might prefer. I mean, now if you look at whatever the contemporary shit is now, I mean, it fits a lot more seamlessly into what's happening now than.
I don't think it was ahead of its time. I just think that there was some cultural mixing in our music.
Right.
That, normally if you can hear raps, you expect Do or Die or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't expect these really progressive kind of beats with pimp raps.
Right.
But now that we know more about the genre and there's so much more of the music up there, we can point to other moments in history before Slum Village.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Beat Nuts, or whether it's certain tracks that Pete Rock and CL Smooth did, where they're doing the same kind of street stuff, but the music is still progressive.
Right. Another group I know that you tracked from their inception on is the Anticon dudes. And those are guys that I've known for a long time, as far as just maybe knowing them since they started, but as a writer in the Bay, they had their own lane and their own movement, obviously, that would end up being pretty influential as the years would go by. But you wrote a few different pieces on them over the years, right?
Yeah, actually, Wazoo got first.
Okay.
He did this big story on them, The Wire.
Yeah, for The Wire.
They
actually was it the cover?
It wasn't a cover.
They did do. I think they had a cover at one point later.
Cloud Dead. That cover.
Right.
But he did a story on them in early 2000 or late 1999. He ended up getting their distribution deal out of that because people saw the story.
Right.
It's kind of same way that Nas did the Odd Future story, and that's Foot Wire, and that's kind of when they put it. So it's the same kind of thing. But the thing with Anticon is that they were so left field.
Yeah.
I still think that people don't do that deal.
Oh yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think in the moment too, because they were so seemingly different, yet I guess, a part of the hip hop genre, that they were definitely people maybe misunderstood some of the projects. They were young guys too. You got to think that when you're 21 years old and shit, a lot of it is, there's still this super competitive kind of, they kind of had just did their own thing, impervious to what people thought. But there was some pretty remarkable, especially I think Cloud Dead was pretty cutting edge for its time, for sure. Very progressive.
I think the Cloud Dead album is kind of the high point.
Right.
I think Soul's album,
Bottle of Humans or Selling Live Water?
Selling Live Water.
Yeah, Selling Live Water was, incredible piece of work.
But overall, I think a lot of the racial issues, also the fact that Soul is crazy, and all of that just kind of, all of that, GRLP,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah, that sort of was a benchmark, if you will. It definitely was a catalyst for a lot of different things. I think that point on, which was interestingly enough, like they're basically like the label's first record and stuff.
Yeah, that was their. I mean, that was their big stint. But then when LP came out with the Trip, which basically eviscerates soul,
right.
That gave a lot of dyed-in-the-wool hip fans to dismiss the old label, and it is doing all these amazing things as far as mixing indie rock and ambient electronics and rap music, but because LP clowned the shit up soul, it's like, oh yeah, well they're soft, they're punks, they don't know what they're doing, it was just they're way more than that, and unfortunately, I don't think that hip hop critics have really caught up to that fact, and also the fact that so much of what they did is descended from the Shapeshifters and Freestyle Fellowship. Sometimes people think that there's some biting those guys, or like, yeah, well, they're the white guys that got all the fame, but meanwhile, what about these other guys? And it's not about that. It's all about the lineage. You know what I mean? Like, those two groups came first, but then Anakin helped push it forward.
Right.
If you can appreciate it in that context, then you can appreciate what it did.
Right. I think, kind of close to that period of time is when I was doing my Culturama thing. And I was, there was a moment when I was, anticipating us talking, when I sort of was thinking about if I should have like a stack of fucking magazines in front of me, because there's obviously lots. Your work is documented in like countless print publications. As is mine for a certain window of time. Yours is your workload has continued on much longer and further than mine. But when I was writing, I was also doing Culturama, which was basically just like a video zine or whatever. It was a compilation of music videos.
I still have them.
Yeah, absolutely. I did 7 volumes of it too. But you did a story on it in Herb, if you recall.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote about you, and I wrote about Hiro Matsuro.
Yes.
He used to do
Practice Video Magazine.
Day by Day. What was the name of the record label he did?
Oh, DJ Hero did. He worked for Mary Joy.
Right, he did Mary Joy, and he also was Vector Omega on Shingo 2's projects.
Right.
And then he did Practice Video Magazine.
Right. Yeah, so that was just like one of very few pieces that were ever written on that too. So, I mean, that was a million years. That was like in 2000 or something. So obviously it was a long time
2002.
Yeah. Was it? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, because I was working on something else. Like, I don't know if you remember this movie, but Nobody Knows My Name.
Nobody Knows My Name. Yeah.
It's by Rachel Ramis, and she put it out in 1999.
Uh-huh.
And it's basically about the struggles of women in rap music. There's one moment in that movie where it's sort of an unforgettable moment for me. Like, I write about it often, where like, it wasn't a Pawnee Bee, but she did the track "I'm Coming."
T-Love.
T-Love.
Right.
So
another Herb alumni.
Yeah. She was an editor there for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, Rachel's interviewing T-Love about career. And T-Love's just talking, and then she just bursts out in tears and she starts crying.
Wow.
And it's like, it's not like she's sobbing like me and you were talking,
right. And
she just burst out crying. And it's like, no other moment in hip hop sums up the plight of women in hip hop quite like that.
Right.
It's just awful, Oh,
absolutely, yeah.
Oh, like so. As you know, I've been working on that recently, and as a result of that, I was going back and reading the story that I did on you and
right. Yeah, because there was a few different like sort of documentary style things that were in that piece. But wait, what are you working on now? How does it apply to what you're working on right now?
Well, I've been writing a lot about just women and rap music.
Oh, cool.
And it's a trail of tears. I mean, hip hop is responsible for a lot of great things, and hip hop is responsible for like not so great things. But
sure,
I think the one thing it's completely unforgivable for me is the way that they have marginalized women in the music. You look at soul music, and for James Brown, there's Aretha Franklin, and for Donny Hathaway, there's Minnie Riperton. I mean, it's near gender equal in terms of the amount of artistic product you can find in soul music. But in hip hop, it's like ever since the late '90s, there's just been this marginalization of them into thoughts and and dimes and video models, and it's wrong, dude.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So, is this a broader piece that you're writing, or is it more just you're consciously for individual pieces, articles, or artists?
I'm thinking of one piece in particular that I can't get into, but
is it yet to be finished?
Yeah, it's yet to be published.
Okay.
I've just been trying to write a couple of pieces about that, just because from a historical perspective, it's just so bad, and also from a current perspective, you have a whole wave of women who are making rap music now, and they kind of hit the glass ceiling at a certain point, and
Okay.
I think it's about changing the consciousness of the rap music listener, the more accepting of female voices.
So who would be a good example of that right now? Would you say like Rhapsody? I slept on her album though, so I might be coming from a somewhat misinformed place. I have to be honest, I haven't peeped out the album, but I know that I've seen how people have been reacting to it.
Yeah, it's a good album. I mean, it's kind of better than the sum of its parts. That's a couple of good tracks.
Yeah,
but people are so hungry right at this point. Everybody wants someone or some women to just come out and just put the flag in the game. And Cardi B is great, but I mean we've seen Cardi B's in the past.
Right.
I think at this point we just want an expansion of all types of voices, not these kind of voices that fit into the current period. I mean, those are good too. Like whatever's, I don't want to say we should limit artists by any means or by any paradigm. But
yeah, sure.
We did, the thing with people like Rhapsody and like Rock,
right.
And
right.
Princess Nokia, and go on, is that they kind of just expand the types of women voice here.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
It's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, interesting. I mean, no, I would love to see what that is. So, I guess by you seeing that too, I was curious too, because obviously you're here in New York, but you're still holding down the Bay, right? You're in SAC or where?
Oakland.
In Oakland. So, but you've been writing while you've been here the whole time. So, are you just working on random projects that are due? Or
yeah,
are you here for a reason for
it's
writing?
It's the year-end list.
Right.
It's year-end season, and or you write 20 blurbs about your favorite album or favorite track. That's pretty much what I'm doing.
And are you a bunch of different places too?
Yeah, right now I'm writing for NPR and Rolling Stone and then Sometime People.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, that's the current slate, and
so
I got homies in the Bay Area. Like if I do stuff for them, like East Bay Express, and yeah.
So I want to talk about that really quickly too. But so with the year-end list for you, is there? Can you give me a taste of where you are ending this year with? I mean, just hot takes, because I'm kind of like a junkie for that type of shit now, because a lot of the times I'll sleep on some of these albums because they just don't necessarily speak to me. Now there's probably some incredibly amazing records that I slept on intentionally for one reason or another, because I think sometimes things are a little over emphasized by the masses and by the press. So there's certain records that might top that list that I was like, I'm gonna listen to that in like 3 years from now, just so it cools off and I don't have. But that's my own personal, weird approach to it. But if you're doing if we're talking about hip hop, so now I'm not going to force you to give me your top 10, but you could at least maybe splash out your top 3 or something as far as full lengths go. Would you be are you willing to do that?
I mean, I don't know if there's a top 3. There's
what were highlights?
I'm thinking about like Kendrick album, obviously, and
what is it?
The Migos album.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, those are kind of the ones that everybody is citing. I guess as far as I guess as far as trends that I'm thinking about the current selection style of SOULECTION style of rap music like Smino and Gold Link. That's kind of an interesting trend. I don't know how well it's going to age. Like, I remember back in the mid 2000s, there was like the OK Players school of rap, like Tanya Morgan and Little Brother, and nobody talks about that stuff anymore. Like, I'm curious if this current wave of selection rap is going to make a bigger impression in the consciousness than that stuff did.
Well, that's debatable, I think, but maybe something will sprout out of that. Would be the next thing. Because just when you mentioned Little Brother, I immediately remembered how Drake kind of like fashioned himself to them for a hot second too, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you're right. I mean, like when Drake did his comeback season tape, which was the tape where people started to take him seriously.
Right.
Like, a lot of that tape was based around like the whole Houston rap and then Little Brother. Yeah. And he actually shouted out Little Brother and Jay Dilla on his So Far Gone tape. Right. So yeah, I mean, they were obviously a big influence on him. And I'm not singling out that one group as a group that people, didn't pay attention to. That's obviously the one. But there was a whole other mass of groups,
of course,
along with them that didn't necessarily make the impact that they should have.
Right, and I think if you there's a couple different ways to look at it too. As a journalist, and then like say the people, the managers and the label type people that are on the other end of it, like whoever was commandeering Spit Kicker and all that stuff, where there's obviously a package. This is their stable of artists that they're working with, so let's get them out there in whatever way we can. Now, if you're in that position, then you kind of have to you shift along with the trends to be able to keep revenue streams coming in too. So, because you can't pummel people with the same stuff every year, and because obviously the audience ages out, they shift and change too. So
no, of course. I mean,
it's not to say that people in Little Brother aren't. They all splintered off and now have their own projects too.
Right. I mean, when I speak about impact, I'm not necessarily talking about record labels. Like, that's a whole other conversation.
Of course.
I'm just talking more about the common that creates these narratives of what hip hop is and what it represents and who matters and who doesn't matter. I think Little Brother, yes. I mean, it seems like people give it grudging respect. Like, we know, a lot of writers from my era kind of hated on Little Brother, like for various reasons, but there are other groups like Strange Fruit Project and Zion I and, again, Tanya Morgan. There's like a whole wave of groups from that mid 2000s era that's probably, for me, like the last interesting stage of what was classically underground hip hop. After they kind of faded away, then it became something different. It became about, blog rap, and, we can go into this whole other thing. But as far as what we were talking about earlier, underground rap, like, that's soulful, OK Player rap, along with the stuff that was coming out of LA, which by the mid 2000s, it wasn't as interesting as it turned into 2000s, in my opinion.
Sure.
But except for Bus Drivers, Fear of a Black Tangent, which is an amazing album.
That is a great album.
But yeah, again, the OK Player was kind of like the last stage, and then you get in. And I asked Tanya Morgan about this, and they were like, "Yeah, we kind of missed out because we were in a transitional period. They came out right when it was transitioning to blog rap, and you had Blue, and you had all of, like, the Detroit guys moving out to LA, and so there's this fusion of Detroit and LA, and that's the stuff that kind of rejuvenated." Non-mainstream rap. You had there's a famous XXL cover with Blue and B.O.B. and Asher.
Which was like, was that not the very first freshman?
That was the second freshman. Actually, the first one was like all these like mixtape street rappers like Saigon and that kind of stuff. And New York was pushing that obviously because they were trying to push this as a movement, but it just didn't happen. But then the second cover was like, Kid Cudi and Ezra Rock and Blue, and like that was the famous cover where it's like the rejuvenation of pop rap and non-mainstream rap.
Right.
And Tanya Morgan should have been part of that, but they came a little bit too soon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a clear divide between that stuff that came a little too soon and the next class, I guess, if you will, of artists, because even on an industry side, the trajectory of their exposure and how they like climbed up the ladder of as far as touring and selling records and music videos and stuff, they're like in a class by themselves, because that then created the model that now you see with all the trap superstars too. Like, I feel like, in a way.
No, you're right. I mean, I remember. Big Sean was kind of considered part of this at first, especially when he was doing his Finally Famous mixtapes.
Yeah.
And he kind of represents a lot of that very open-minded, like, blog rap kind of turn it pop rap.
Totally.
But I remember seeing him in 2010. This is right around the time that My Last came out. So I guess either the end of 2010 or the beginning of 2011. And first of all, it was this, it was like a sold out show. And people were like rapping along to all the songs.
Right.
And he performed for like an hour and a half, and the crowd was engaged the entire time. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this guy has never put out a major label album, but he has this crowd going for like an hour and a half, and
right.
I mean, that speaks to the testament of him as an artist. We can get into a debate about, the quality of his music.
Sure.
That speaks to the testament of him as an artist, but it also speaks to the testament of that movement that you were describing. Like, by that whole blog rap thing had just elevated into something much more greater from a commercial perspective than the previous OK Play.
Right. An interesting example of that too is like Currency. So Currency sort of is like toggled back and forth between both worlds in a way, where he like, it just reminded me as you were saying it, because first you would go to like Wiz Khalifa, who obviously turned into like mega pop.
Well, the thing about Wiz Khalifa is that he kind of started off as a casting stone.
Okay.
Like, if you listen
what do you mean by
to
that? You said casting stone?
Cassidy.
Oh, Cassidy.
Like, I'm a hustler. I'm a hustler.
Right, of course.
You listen to his first album, like he's doing like all of these kind of like street, like mid-art street rap knockoffs, like Young and I'm on his grind.
I remember that one. Yeah.
And then he did the Say Yeah track, and that's when he kind of like flipped.
Yeah. He kind of figured out like his formula. Yeah, it's funny because Young and on My Grind is very different than obviously the shit he's doing now. Which is kind of he definitely has a formula. Obviously. But Currency is like an interesting one because they were like an early, pair together as far as like doing tours, and he was always in their kind of that video blog thing that Wiz Khalifa did for a long time. But Currency, in a way, and I'm not going to sit here and say I know every album he did, because I don't.
I don't think anybody does.
Right, but the guy, you got to give it to him for consistency alone, because he has his market and seems very faithful to him. But he still is kind of like almost like a throwback to that that mid 2000s. Okay, I think so. Where he never went like way pop as far as like knowing that this is the formula. Like Big Sean obviously did, and Wiz Khalifa did, and even Mac Miller, to a degree, So
well, I mean, Currency had a little bit of a different trajectory. Like he really, he's a new rapper,
right?
Like he's like a video game who wasn't in the streets per se, but he's around street people.
Right.
So he was on Lil Wayne label, and
oh, that's right.
He's doing like Where's the Cash At and that kind of stuff. And then it's blog rap, Come Think Long, and that kind of allows him to create a persona that's a little bit closer to what it really is.
Right.
Which is more of like the alchemist, stoner, street stoners.
Yeah, exactly. Street stoners, which is a genre all unto itself right now, too. Like,
yeah.
Action Bronson obviously is like the top of the heap of that, and Alchemist.
Well, Action Bronson is a top of the heap maybe in terms of sales, but not in terms of quality.
Right. I'd love to talk. What trap shit are you like invested in as far as a writer? Have you been writing about it at all, or?
You mean? I mean, trap is like
as far as like the most current artists of this year, as far as them putting records out, like because I have my guys that I follow, and I'm more a fan of their music videos and their single songs, so I don't listen to any of the albums. Like I like Trippie Redd and Ski Mask, The Slump God, but that's as a journalist, obviously I'm sure there's been people will pounce upon that to write about it because it just happens to be the current thing of this year too. It's obviously the inverse of say what like some of the albums that will top out a Kendrick Lamar, but I don't know. I just wanted to get your take on it because it's quality wise, the writing obviously is very much like it's in a cycle. It's every song is almost identically like lyrically. Do you fuck with it at all? Do you find anything redeemable about it as a writer?
To be honest, I haven't dived too deeply into it. Like for me, one of the things I've been doing this year is like sort of rejuvenating, my love affair with indie rap. Like whether it's Quell Chris or I think John Wayne is doing some really interesting stuff with his Authors Recording label, and I just find that stuff more interesting at the moment. Danny Watts' album is interesting.
Oh, I gotta check that out. I haven't listened.
I think with a lot of the second wave trap, emo rap, whatever you want to call it, like there's so much noise around that genre at this point, and I feel like a lot of the noise isn't serious critical attention. It's more like, okay, this is what the kids are listening to. We better figure it out.
Right.
And they haven't necessarily figured it out yet. You know, maybe next year they will. But I mean, for me, like that's not what my strength is as a music writer. Like,
where do you find your strength as a writer?
Well, I'm not good at like trend mongering. Like I'm not the guy that like finds the rapper that's going to be big 2 weeks before everybody else.
Right.
I'm the guy that like, the rapper will come out and I'll be like, okay, what does this fit? And I think what I do that other writers don't necessarily do is try to draw connections between what's happening now, what happened 10 years ago, what happened 20 years ago, what happened 30 years ago.
Context.
Yeah, I'm really good at context. I would say that that's where my strength lies.
Right. I think with the book too, that is like a really great tool for this Notes on Post-Millennial Rap, which you self-published too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I did self-publish it as a kind of a limited edition item, and it's sold out, so don't ask for many copies. Actually,
I bought mine, so I'm good. You know what I'm saying? Like I bought this one right when you put it out.
Actually, I do have a couple of copies left. But yeah, I mean.
Well, I just love to get your. I mean, for context, it's great because it's obviously it's in a good canon of books that have sort of. There's not a lot of books like this, but there are some like and some from back in the day, David Toops, where you can go back to them at any period of time. It's not really like stuck in one specific thing.
David Toops' Rap Attack that was a big influence on the first section where I talk about old school rap up to 1987. One of the things I try to do that David Toop didn't do is David Toop was very focused on New York rap.
Right.
The late 70s to 1984.
Right.
That's his sweet spot. And so what I try to do is I try to add information about old school West Coast hip hop, and not even the electro stuff, but a lot like people don't know that Coolio recorded his first track in 1983, and
I didn't know that.
So did Kid Frost, Raza. He recorded his first track Spec. And
what do those sound like? Are they more on the electro side or less? Are they more?
Some of them are, but Ice-T, for example, he's pretty dismissive of his stuff before 6 a.m. But if you listen to his tracks like The Coldest rap.
Right.
Like, he's still spitting that pimp street flow.
Right.
It's just not as explicit and violent as his famous 6 in the Morning is.
Right.
I try to like draw a connection between that early electro rap where there's still like some of that street element and the more famous, NWA and Ice-T kind of stuff.
Right.
And then I also mentioned the Miami stuff,
Which is very important, especially talk about context. I mean, Miami now as opposed to Miami 30 years ago, hip hop wise, is pretty interesting. What about Eminem?
Well,
what about his new record? Have you listened to it?
Oh yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I have not. I haven't listened to a record of his in a minute, but I love nothing more than reading journalists' takes on his stuff, because like Pitchfork, for example, they just annihilate him every time he comes out.
The thing with Eminem's, I write about the album Recovery, and the thing about Recovery is it's one of the few albums that talks honestly about being, addiction and recovering from it's become sober,
which is absolutely an important thing to talk about. Yeah.
And I think the album has a lot to offer as far as themes.
Right.
Maybe his lyrical performance isn't as good as it was during his salad days of 1998 to 2002.
Sure.
But I think thematically, it's probably one of the more interesting albums of this decade. Just as instead of sort of sliding into emo rap, where he's just whining about how high he is, he kind of actually struggles with his issues. He does that, and then Kid Cudi, obviously, he's put out a couple of albums like that. But it's really rare in rap where you kind of say, okay, I'm not going to just promote the party life. I'm actually going to talk about sort of the consequences of that.
Right. But why do you think the press just like destroy him every time he comes out? Is it just he's just an easy target? Right?
He's an easy target, and I think some of it is backlash. Rolling Stone back in 2003 did this cover called "The Genius of Eminem," and the press is so onto him for so long, and then when he came back with Relapse, the culture just moved on, and they didn't know where to fit him, and also he's a provocateur. He says a lot of provocative things.
Right.
We could have a whole debate about, whether it's problematic or whether he's playing a character, but I think the press hasn't really figured that out, it's problematic to use misogynist language. It's problematic to use homophobic language, and he spent a good part of his career, he spent most of his career doing that, Now we could have a debate about, the fact why he did it and whether that has led to artistically credible music that expresses in American society that doesn't necessarily get admitted to,
Right.
And I think that's part of the power of his music, but I don't think the press is really ready to have that conversation.
Right. Do you think you would write another book?
Yeah, definitely.
Are you working on one?
I
don't mean to put you on blast like that.
No. I have some things I'm developing.
So how was this process for you? Obviously writing multiple pieces like this and publishing it. Well, I would love to know your experience with it, just the process of it. Was it a pain in the ass? It must have been a little bit, right?
Well, there were some design issues,
okay.
And I'm not blaming the designer. She did an amazing job, but there were some glitches in terms of what I wanted, and I didn't communicate that properly. Oh, it's more like that kind of stuff, just constructing it. But
the workload,
the pieces, they're all previously published pieces.
Nice.
The section I have on Hip Hop 101, which spans from 1979 to 1987, those were published on Rhapsody. and then a lot of the other stuff was published in like Spin and Rolling Stone.
Right. Nice. Yeah. I would love to talk too, just more about just where the other spots that you've written for, because you've kind of you represent a very certain kind of music journalist where you've worked and contributed to countless places. So, and when I was in the trenches, and this was a while ago, because I basically would shift over into like putting records out and then booking tours, working as an agent and as a manager. But I went to school for journalism. My heart is really in writing and I love to read other journalists too. I really get a kick out of that. But I know that what the grind was like back when I was really deep in it. So how do you? I mean, first I'd love to know like just how you've managed that over the years too, because it's tough to make a living doing it. And
it is tough,
right. That goes without saying. And just like because obviously you came out of the print industry, which is by and large it's changed dramatically. It's shrunk.
Well, it's almost non-existent.
Exactly. So I mean, from getting gigs to keeping like active too, because you've also like had your own couple of blogs too, websites too. So is there a way, in a nutshell, to kind of like
sorry to interrupt you, but R.I.P. to DJ Steph, who passed away in September, and she worked with me on my Plug One mag blog, which is I mean, it's still up, but it's defunct.
But people can go back to that.
Yeah, people can go back to that, and
I didn't realize
she has some banners on there.
Dope. What an amazing friend, and just like people like Steph they're very few and far between in this business. Who's really she was a writer at her heart. I mean, Vinyl Exchange was a great zine and unbelievable, and yet somehow a trade magazine at the same time.
And I tried to, I tried to get her to do some stuff too.
Right.
Yeah.
Did she contribute some stuff?
No, she didn't. I mean, she kind of transitioned into just being a designer at a certain point. But yeah, I mean, I tried to get her some gigs at different places.
Oh, word! Oh, amazing. Well, yeah. So Plug One that evolved into what? There's another one called Critically Minded, right?
Yeah, I mean, Critical Minded is just me, like, kind of publishing some of the pieces that I've done over the years that aren't available anymore.
Right.
I mean, obviously, if I had like 80 hours in a day, like I would make it into something bigger than that. Maybe it will be that, but for right now, it's just kind of archive some of the better pieces. One piece, for example, that I did was on the era of 80s black music between like 1981 and 1987, and one thing people don't know about that era is like a cultural apartheid, between 1982 and 1983 until Michael Jackson came out. Like there were no black singers who topped the charts.
Really?
Yeah, zero, and there were only black music albums that top charts. It was like
what were those?
Prince and Michael Jackson.
Right. So then this piece is exploring the records that came out that weren't chart toppers, or what?
Well, what it does is it explores back then. If you were a black artist and you managed to actually get something that sold in platinum or double platinum numbers, you were called a crossover artist.
Right.
And what I did is I talk about that whole crossover phenomenon and
oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's an era that's forgotten now.
Well, it's interesting too. I would say like Dame Funk is an interesting example of sort of resurrecting or sharing the music of this of not exclusively of those few years, but a lot of what would be the bed of modern funk, quote, which is a genre really he pioneered, which really is revisiting a lot of these great, like, I guess, funk and R&B albums, if you had to be deductive about it. Is that the direction you're going with it, or
the story that I wrote is a little bit more expansive, but just going into Dame Funk, one of the brilliant things that he does is he resurrects that early 80s era when you could turn on a black music station and you would hear Kraftwerk.
Right.
You might hear some Yellow Magic Orchestra, as well as hearing the smooth jams by the Whispers.
Right.
And it was this whole dynamic mix of music, as long as it fit into a certain paradigm. I remember when Dame Funk used to play Messages from the Stars.
Of course. Yeah.
Those tracks got played on black music radio. It's unthinkable now. Now it's just hip hop and R&B, and that's it.
I know,
but
so
it wasn't like that back then.
Right.
I discovered Kraftwerk on KSOL, which is a black music station. I remember watching Magic Number Video, which was this video show based out of San Francisco, and they would play A-E-A-E-I-O. You remember that song?
No, what was
I-O-U, it's Arthur Baker produced track.
Okay, right. Of course.
I-O-U.
Yeah.
They would play that, and there's all the synth pop, and they would play Culture Club, and it was such a dynamic view of pop music, and when Dame Funk does his thing, he's coming from that era where his basis, is the electro funk.
Right.
But
he's
coming from and African Mbata said this too. When hip hop is just a way to do the world.
Right.
It's not a way to shut yourself off the world.
Yeah, that's a great point.
When you look at hip hop, you're looking at certain aspects of country music. You're looking at certain aspects of experimental classical music, music concrete. Looking at rock music. But it's all coming from that view, and so that's absolutely what Dame Funk does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that lends itself to such a great conversation about music during that period of time where, say, if you were born in the late 60s or early 70s and you were going to shows in the early 80s, I mean, maybe, I guess it doesn't truly matter when you were born, but if you were really actively buying albums or going to concerts or discos or clubs during that period of time and through the 80s, I feel where blacks and whites and everyone in between there was a much more it seemed like there was more of a general kinship pre-MTV, where the programming we weren't as programmed where people could freely go into a record store. And this is just riffing off the top of my head. I know that there's something there where it's a little less regimented. It's a little less segregated in some ways, even though
the dance music scene was much more of a dynamic music scene.
Yeah.
Now the mainstream was very segregated, and MTV didn't play. They didn't really get behind a black music video until Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, and the only reason why they did that is because Columbia threatened to pull all of their artists if they didn't do it. And one of the points I made in my aforementioned piece is that these crossover artists were not underground artists. It wasn't they had huge label resources behind them, but because the radio and label industry tended to view things you're in a black music section or you're in a pop music section. Even with huge financial resources, they still had a lot of trouble breaking through to the mainstream. Now that's one side of it. Right. The other side of it is dance music, which was going through this crazy post-disco era where people were just experimenting with synthesizers and learning how to use computers, and that's where you see a lot of the dynamism as people of different races working together, just making these great tracks.
Right. Do you think? And you basically grew up in the Bay, so did you feel what was your first experiences going out and seeing music?
The first concert I saw was Teddy Pendergrass.
Hey.
That was 1981 or 80, just before the car crash. Obviously.
Wow.
But
yes, of course.
This was at the Circle Star Theater, and
yeah.
I didn't like it. It was just constant screaming. The women were just screaming throughout the whole show and throwing panties on the stage. And I just spent like most of the time like cupping my hands over my ears. Now, this first show that actually made an impact on me was in Luther Vandross and the Barge. And Luther Vandross, when he walked down the aisle, like he was handing out balloons to the crowd, and like they had these little set pieces on stage, like David Bowie or something. Like you would, and actually, he worked with David Bowie, but they had they would put club tables on the stage, and they pretend like they're sitting at the club, it was very cute. And I mean, that was an amazing show for me. That's probably like the first that's the show that stands out for me. Rest in peace, Luther Vandross.
Absolutely. So then you must have seen some pretty early seminal hip hop shows in the Bay then too.
No, not really. I mean,
you were just doing the R&B shows as a young man. Is that what it was? Or
well, no. The thing with me is I'm much more. I mean, I like going to concerts, and I mean, I've seen some great concerts in my day.
Sure.
But I guess for me, as a music writer, music thinker, like it's always been much more about the recordings. Like I tend to focus much more on that. Having said that, like I remember seeing like Q-Bird and I don't know if you knew about this group FM2O.
I don't think so.
Back in the day, or Q-Bird and Apollo and Mixmaster Mike formed the Scratch Pickles. Right. They were called the Rocksteady DJs, and when they were called the Rocksteady DJs, they had this rap group called FM2O.
Oh wow!
And I used to go to college with one of the rappers in FM2O. And so, I went and saw them at like this heavy metal club called the Stone Pony. And we had to like sit there.
The Stone Pony?
Yeah. And we had to sit there and like listen to these really horrible rock bands play for about 2 hours.
Huh.
And there was like this weird video of Jello Biafra's, gosh, it's one of like his weird like side projects. But like, it's like, I don't know, whatever. So then like FM2O got on stage, and like there's 3 JZs, and they're all scratching, and then the rappers are going, and then they had some b-boys come out and b-boy, and that was
impressive, man.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I just like trying to get some context because of the amount of stuff that you've covered over the years. Obviously, it's informed by your own personal experiences. I mean, yes, you can take on any assignment and then kind of get a little deeper macro with it, but we all come from somewhere and have like these like kind of really early impressionable things that sort of set the tone for a forming opinions, and that we kind of like hone as a writer, at least like for your whole life basically. So I'm just interested in it because we've known each other for such a long time, and granted, I haven't seen you in a long ass time.
Yeah.
But we've run in the same circles for years and know and have covered a lot of the same artists too. And I know that I don't personally have a ton of time today, so I'm just thrilled that I was able to catch you here in New York, because I've been wanting to talk to you since I started the podcast too.
No, thank you.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, man. And the fact that you're just keeping in there and getting and just continuing to write is it's dope, man. I think it's inspiring too, because it's not an easy career. It's challenging.
No, it's not. I mean,
it's challenging just to stay engaged, right?
Yeah, it is. I think liking other kinds of music is important.
Of course.
If I get burned out on hip hop, then I'll listen to like indie. I mean, I've been listening to indie rock lately. And
what rock records? Any contemporary stuff from this year too, or what?
I mean, nothing. I mean, I listen to King. I like King Cruel album. I like even a Phoenix album. It's very ephemeral, but like I like it. It's fun.
Well, some of those groups now they're starting to pull from other genres too. I mean, their music is informed. Who I fuck with is interesting, because you said King Cruel is the guys that opened up for him on this past tour, Standing on the Corner, which is an incredible group from here in Brooklyn. Yeah, that supported his last tour. It's like kind of cut and paste, sample heavy. I guess you'd call it hip hop. It's like a MF Doom interlude or something like that. But it's really dope. But he's a hip hop head too, King Cruel. If you would call, if you can still say that term. But
no, definitely. There's a lot of hip hop elements on that album.
For sure.
There's a whole lineage of of British singers using the poetry. I mean, if you want to even go back to John Cooper Clarke, like guys that are used talking is sort of a way to create this very Baroque, morose British music,
Right.
And there's a whole
Robert Wyatt. That's another one, right?
No, Robert Wyatt is more from the jazz fusion. He was part of the soft machine.
Right. He has this one song called Pigs that I always liked. It's sort of like that spoken word stuff. Yeah. But I mean, we could riff on so many tangents. That's what that's why I love that. And hopefully, if possible, we can maybe, if I'm in the Bay again, or if you got the next book or whatever, we can do another one of these too, man. If you're down.
I mean, that would be awesome. I always love talking about music.
Yeah, I love listening to it, man. Cool. So thank you so much too for your time, man. I appreciate it, Mosi.
Thank you.
All right, peace, man. Yo. Thanks to Mosi for swinging through. We recorded this conversation in Brooklyn, New York. He's from the Bay, as you have learned in this conversation if you didn't already know. It's not too late to subscribe to the podcast, so do it while you can. I really appreciate it. On any means, do it on SoundCloud, which is the Houseless Podcast. You can follow us at Twitter at HouselessPod for more updates and all of that. Thanks so much. Every episode, edited by CJ. Shout out to him. And I appreciate your guys' time as always. I know there's a lot of different music podcasts out there on the heap, in the weeds, but you take a couple minutes to listen to mine every once in a while, and I really appreciate it. It's all self-produced. It's a very DIY type of thing, and I handpick each and every guest. So thanks again. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.